Hello and welcome to the final setup based episode of Brian's Hobby Hangout. So we've done two videos so far, one that covered the majority of everything very quickly. We've done a more detailed one on airbrushing, and now we're going to do a more detailed video on conventional brushing and the paints and brushes that I've got on this setup. Getting straight into it, the first part is the wet palette. I've painted the top of mine black so that it's easier for me to show miniatures on the top of it. Inside you have a container that needs to be watertight, something that will hold liquid. By that I mean, in this case, it's a thick card that's designed to be a bit like blotting paper, but kitchen towel is used by a lot of people. And then something to put your paint on top. Now this came with the wet palette, but if you're not using this, or if you're making your own, just using a Tupperware tub, some kitchen roll, that can be baking paper. It's what a lot of people use. You're then trying to get that smoothed down as possible. Various people have really good videos on it. I will try and make one on how to do it and the best way to set it up when I get to setting up that stage. At the moment we're just looking at the setup. So, and then this is where you base your paints. You want this, as I said, to be as smooth as possible, so your paints sit smoothly and so that they have good contact with the damp substrate below, because that's what keeps them dry. Keeps them damp. Then when you're not using them, you can put the lid back on, and that will keep your paints wet and usable for days when they dry out in hours otherwise. So if you've mixed up a colour that you want and you want to be able to use it for a few days while you're getting your miniature right, that's a really good way of doing it. As I mentioned, I have two brushes as standard. I have my workhorse brush, as it were, which are Raphael 3.0s. 3.0 is the size. They do go smaller. You can get a 5.0, but I find a 5.0 doesn't hold enough paint in the body of the brush. It's also a good idea to make sure you keep your brush covers to protect the nibs. But that one's broken. The other brush still wants a reasonable nib on it. This is our 1.0, so it's a lot bigger, but it's there to clean. It's not there to actually apply paint. All this gets is clean water and then cleaned off very quickly after I've had to use it to correct a mistake or erase a mistake. And just carefully put it back in. Piece of paper, as I explained, cheap crepe paper, to just spray airbrush or put bits of paint on so that you're aware of what you're doing and the colours that you've got and that they're what you want. Then I will normally have, off to the side, hopefully remembering to put it away so it doesn't get eaten by the dog, a bit of kitchen paper. What this does is it gives me something to clean my brushes on, and if you're dry brushing, you're trying to get most of the paint off the brush, it's also used for that. That's what I will generally have in front of me with whatever paints I'm using put onto my wet palette. Over to the side I've got more brushes, so I've got specialist brushes like these, which have a nice soft rounded tip, which are good for dry brushing. Another one I find good for dry brushing, that is just a standard makeup brush, but it's got a large soft tip, so it's really nice for dry brushing large areas. Now, as I've mentioned, I use Raphael brushes. They're Kolinsky Sable. They're fairly expensive. You don't need to use those. If you do, you want to look after them. But I also have these, which are Sea Whites. This one's a 2.0, which are synthetic brushes. They are considerably cheaper. They cost about £1.50 each. And therefore, if I'm doing a job, if I'm doing fine dry brushing that the other dry brushes won't do, and I'm doing something to a brush that I'm going to want to be comfortable if I kill it, then I'm going to want to use one of those rather than the expensive. On the other hand, there are some really, really good painters out there that only use these cheap synthetic brushes. So again, find what's right for you. Various sizes. One thing to be aware is that sizes, so I've got a 00 there. Go back to this one, which is a 2, and this one. So if we look at the two different sizes, the tips and the size of the tips are radically different. That's because there is no standard for them. They are based by manufacturer. So a size 1 in one brush might be closer to a size 2 in another brush. So always try and look at your brushes, know what you're getting. Don't just trust. If you're going online to somewhere like Amazon, buy one, check it's the size you want before you buy a lot. I have one brush that I've put metallic paint round. Metallic paint puts lots of little metal flakes in your paint which can damage your brushes. So rather than damage them all, I tend to use a brush that I've used once I've finished with it, or I'm worried that it's starting to fail. I will start using it for metallic paints, so that I've only got one brush at a time that's really suffering in that way. When you're working in really fine detail, doing eyes, work what's best with you. So I know some people that use things like toothpicks to do eyes. I have, for occasional use, 003 sized fine liner that can do the black tips in the eye should you choose to. Again, this is a toolkit. Find the bits that work for you. I know other people that use acrylic paint pens. There's all sorts of things out there. There's lots of videos to give you advice. I mentioned brush cleaner in the last video. So this is basically a soapy substance that you use to clean off your brushes when you're finished at the end of the day. It gets all of the paint residue out. What you're trying to do is make sure that there's no paint in the seat of the brush where it joins the main body. I'm sure there are correct terms for them, I just can't think of them right now. So this means you can get cleaner right up in there and get them cleaned out, and that will help your brush's life continue for a long time. If you're looking for some really good videos just on brushes, there's a YouTube channel by someone called Squidmar, and he's gone as far as actually making his own brushes, so I'd give those a look. Other good channels for resources, there's Vince Ferrantula, and I quite like Maniac, or Scott the Miniature Maniac, so go have a look at theirs. They're quite fun. They're some of the ones I used for advice. Citadel paints, as I mentioned, you have to work in the tip for. I'm not a big fan of that, though for years Citadel were my go-to paint. It's only recently that I discovered Vallejo. I've got a range of paints. As I said, most of the ones I've got are Vallejo. These are standard pigment-based paints. The two ranges of theirs that I use are Game Colour and Model Colour. Game Colour are very vibrant. They're more for fantasy and science fiction work. Model Colour are slightly more dulled. They're what get used for conventional military painting. Vallejo also have an airbrush range where they're already thinned down to be used in an airbrush. There are different types, so Scale 75 do a gel-based medium rather than the medium type used in these, and what that means is actually they will thin down slightly better because of the way the pigment is dispersed in the gel rather than a more liquid-based medium. Especially with the whites, when you're using a very vivid white, when you thin it down it can almost get dusty. There's less of that effect on the gel-based mediums. So you don't always want to stick to just one particular manufacturer for your paints. Army Painter do a good range that are fairly cheap as well, and they do their own brush ranges and all sorts of other bits and pieces. Washes are something you use to tidy up a miniature. So you put a base colour on, then you wash it. The wash will seep into any of the recesses, giving you darks and highlights. They can be used to tweak colours slightly, make things look slightly more dirty, depending on what you want, how thin down it is and how much it flows. Inks work in a very similar way to washes, but they have more pigment in them. So that means that you get a stronger colour. Again, they're good for stronger glazes, glazing being applying lots of layers of a paint to create a blended effect. We'll look at blended effects and different ways to create them in other videos, or there are some really good videos on the sources I've already mentioned. My choice for inks, though I've got some Vallejo ones because they came in a bundle, are Daler Rowney FW. There are some really nice ones out there. One of the better ones, if I can find it, is Payne's Grey. I know that looks very blue, but it's really good for creating shadows. Wash wise, I've got Model Wash, which is a larger version of the washes you can get from Vallejo. This is again good for creating darker shadows, darkening and contrast on your miniatures. So I've got a variety of flesh colours, because flesh is actually made up of a lot of colours. The base colours that currently I'll mix to create the colour that I want. Then 3 different varieties of varnish. Matte is what it says. It's a very dull, it takes all the shine and glossiness away. Gloss is very shiny, almost like a shiny plastic, and satin somewhere between the two. So if I put these down beside it, hopefully they will show up well enough on video to give you an idea. So these were done using the black 3.0 that I was talking about, which creates this really dark matte effect on this side. And then I wanted to see what they looked like varnished, which is what you get from the other side. So that'll give you an idea of what the varnishes do, and in this case the effect they have on matte black paint. I have the same varnishes available for my airbrush. Most of my varnishing is done by airbrush, but sometimes you can use varnishes for special effects, or you just want to do narrow areas. So you might want to gloss an eye, because eyes tend to have a shiny effect. Or you may have done matte over most of the miniature, but you've got some bits of metal that you want to re-bring up because you painted them before you actually put on the final varnish. I've then got some specialist mediums. chipping medium and crackle medium are kind of special effects. Chipping medium means you can chip off bits of the paint fairly easily afterwards, which can create the effect of damage or chipped paint, because that's what you're doing if you want that. So you paint one colour underneath, put on your chipping medium with your other colour, and then that top colour will come off, showing the colour below. Crackle medium has a similar effect, but it creates lots of cracks as the paint contracts. So you're not going to be taking it off, but you're going to create a cracked, damaged effect. Retarder medium is there to slow down how quickly a paint will dry. So it means you've got longer time working with it on your brush. I also have plastic putty, which goes with milliput and green stuff, both that I also have, which are used when you're assembling miniatures to remove any cracks and make sure you've got a smooth finish, or can be used in modelling in general. Some people will get some polystyrene plastic cement and bits of polystyrene, sprue, so not expanded polystyrene, standard polystyrene, and put that into the cement to create a kind of gunge to do the same effect with. Glaze medium is there, pardon the dogs if you can hear them in the background, for creating glazes. It gives you a way to thin your paint while maintaining the spread and the consistency of the colour that you're working with. So whereas Flow Improver will cause it to flow off a raised area, the glaze medium will cause it to go on more evenly. I have two varieties of metal. So I've got the standard game colour metals, but I've also got metal colour. The metal colours are probably some of the nicest I've seen. You can see they're airbrush colour, so they can probably go straight into an airbrush without a substantial amount of thinning, and they have a really nice metal effect. They flow really well. So that's the bulk of the different paints and the brushes. You can create all sorts of interesting effects. There's lots of things I don't know, lots of bits out there I haven't used. I always try and have a couple of spare brushes in, so that when this one, if that dies in the middle of a miniature, I don't have to wait for a new one to arrive. Sometimes you can get cheap costs buying them in bulk, but yeah, brushes, for some people they last a long time, for some people they last 6 months, for some people they last a miniature. It's all based on how you treat your brushes. Look after them, they're delicate little beings. Other hugely important thing, as I mentioned, is light. I mentioned that this light I like so that I can stick it on the front here. If I'm over here painting, my back is heavily arched, so at my age, after a period of time, and a very short one at that, my back is going to start complaining. With this, it's easier to stay sat further back, keep my back straight, and be working straight in front of me. And I've got the magnification, because equally, being old, my eyes are going. When I was first doing this at 15, I could see everything in huge detail and didn't need any kind of light. Sadly, those days are long gone. The other bits and pieces are liable to come in as we go through painting miniatures. So how to clean a miniature, all of the preparation with that. If there's anything you think I've missed, if there's anything you want to know, then put it in the comments. Drop me a line. Come and ask me questions on the Discord. Put questions on the Facebook page. Come and join us and join on the community. You may know more about this than I do. Then feel free. I'm not an expert. I'm not a beginner. I took a long time out of the painting hobby, but I'd really like to get involved in conversations with people that know more. One idea I've had, if I can get any of the larger names at some point, or even just some of you guys, is to almost have a painting chat show at times. So you've got both people on the screen, and while we're painting, we're chatting and we're answering questions from chat, and we're having a nice social event while we're doing it. Painting can be very lonely, because prior to all of the current technology, you were on your own where your paints were. But now with Zoom, with YouTube, with Twitch, with Discord, we can all communicate while we're doing the same thing. I'll put in a Discord voice channel for painting so that people can just go into the Discord voice channel and have companionship while they're sat with their paints. So there's lots going on. Come and join us. The link to the Discord and Facebook are both on the YouTube image, but also I'll put links in the text. If you like us, then hit like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and it will tell you when I've posted new videos, or when I get to the point of doing it, we have live upcoming streams. This is about you as much as it is about me. I can't do this on my own. So please become part of the hangout. Come tell me about your hobbies. Tell me about other hobbies. I have hobbies that aren't currently part of the normal thing that will probably find their way in. I'm a keen scuba diver, amongst other things. So we can make this our space, and that's what my aim is. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll come and see the others. Until next time, bye.